For those of you that don't know me, I am Cynthia Cayley. I'm a legislator for the 28th District. And I'm here today to, for this press conference to offer information on the referral that's coming up for Agenda Charter next week on Monday. And this is to establish a dignified indigent burial policy within the county of Monroe. There are many of you that are familiar with the fact because we did this once before. And I won't spend too much time talking about it, but the initial referral was not accepted by administration and returned. We had since taken basically the same referral and resubmitted it as a local law. And what that means is that if this is accepted, which I certainly hope that it is, that as a result, the Department of Human Services, the community, but mostly the county, will develop a consistent burial policy that will secure an honorable and dignified process for anyone who takes advantage or needs to take advantage of the services that the county has for burial arrangements. I have a few remarks, and I'll keep them brief. But this legislation is an important step to restoring trust with the county that we can treat even its most vulnerable citizens with dignity and respect that they deserve at a time when they are in most need. As members of the human race, we are bound by compassion and law to offer care and assistance to those who, for whatever reason, have less than enough to handle the expense of life and death. Indigent burials are budgeted a mere $1,250, and that's a drop in the bucket when someone of modest means or more is planning a burial. But it is the funding allotted from the state and the county, and at this point in time, it is what we have to work with. Whether it is a man, a woman labeled as indigent, or a mother, son, father, daughter, or grandparent, cousin, what have you, whose family does not have the means for more, we as legislators should at the very least work within our immediate means to deliver a final burial that gives dignity and honor to the life now gone. There are those who say, why waste money on the dead? My response is that the county isn't wasting money on burials. And at this time, we are providing the bare minimum, but not as well as it should be. I did bring some visuals with me, and they'll be there for anyone that wants to look at them after this is over, but they are not exaggerated, nor have they been edited. I took them on Sunday when I went to visit the cemetery out at Irwaka Creek. There are markers that fade in less than a year and are hidden from sight or have no identifying information at all, along with grassless placement, and these are not the conditions that any of us should accept or be comfortable with. These markers represent the life of a person, a woman or child, man, who have died and been treated with little respect, if any, in those final moments. And to me, they're being treated more as a commodity, not a person. I applaud those in our community who have taken on the mantle of burying the homeless and reaching out to assist grieving families in need of direction to fund or bury a loved one. Theirs is a very difficult and heart-wrenching position. This referral will establish a policy that is clear and consistent and that will address the service providers, funeral homes, and cemeteries in their roles as well. This referral has no need of a budget. It will cost only the time it takes to write the policy, which would include some community voices, providers of services, and those who have taken on the role to assist the community with no remuneration asked. I'm asking that this referral be accepted by my colleagues this next week, and signed into law by our county executive. The county would ensure that funeral homes responsible for the body and burial offer a more permanent marker, and be responsible to offer all options to families along with suggestions as to savings with regards to services. The cemeteries would be held accountable for a respectful resting place and its upkeep, and set standards for ground care. And that is really about it. I'm going to ask that Sister Beth has a few comments, and I'd like to have her come up. Sister Beth?
My name is Sister Beth Lavallee, and I'm here representing Greater Rochester Community of Churches Faith in Action Network, and I also stand here as a Sister of St. Joseph of Rochester. Since the end of January, I've had the privilege of facilitating a number of ministers and attendees to be present for burial services, primarily at Oaka Cemetery. And I happened to find my grandmother's memorial book last night. And even though she died at age 101, there were several people here who were present for her and for us. And the people that I relate to, there's another program that we have, but the people I relate to end up having a page that's empty because no one is there except those of us from the faith community who did not know them. So because we have people who are very vulnerable with no support systems around them, I'm going to suggest to the faith community, and you're the first ones to hear it, that we have a People's Super PAC. And that People's Super PAC will continue through election season. And what we want to see with the county legislature is that we together, in mutuality, will work with the compassion that my grandmother had, with her wisdom and compassion. And we will not be working with the routine of our ordinary local politics. I now turn this over to Sister Grace, followed by Father Larry Tracy, and then Mark Mish.
Good morning. I'm here today with the House of Mercy, representatives from the House of Mercy, and we're all here today because we are very concerned about the way our poor are treated when they die. You all saw in the papers where the poverty rate of children in Monroe County has gone from 14 to 7th in the state. We are the 7th poorest
in the country.
In the country, right. Okay. Now, that means poverty is really prevalent here in Rochester. And the way we treat our living, we are very concerned about. And we try our hardest to respect our people when they are living. But we also want to respect our people when they die. Because their bodies are as sacred in death as they were in life. And so we have been struggling with our people who come to us practically daily asking for help because they do not want to cremate a loved one. Poor people should have a choice of cremation or burial, just as a wealthy person or wealthy family has that choice. So we're fighting here for justice for the poor in life and in death.
That's right.
All we're asking is that the county respect our people who die and pay for calling hours, a funeral, and a burial. Many of our people want to go to the cemetery and pray and be with their loved ones after death. We know the county has the money. We hear the county doesn't have the money, but we know the county has the money. When money is taken from the poor and salaries are increasing at the top, then we know that the money is there. And we wonder why the money has to be taken from the poor to be given to the wealthy and salaries at the top. We want justice for our people in death and in life. So we're saying we want some kind of a set amount so that our people, when they choose to be buried, can have a wake, calling hours, a funeral, and be buried in the cemetery of their choice. Not that they be forced to go to a local cemetery, which we know has to be changed and it should be dressed up, it should be treated better. But we want our people to have a choice as to what cemetery they go to, as well as having what they want when a loved one dies. We've been fighting this issue for 6 years. We're asking the county to please take these proposals to a committee and discuss them, bring them to the legislature, discuss them, so that justice can be done for our poor. We are here speaking for our poor, for life, their living condition, and for them when they die. We're asking that they be treated with justice and with compassion.
Buenos dias. I'm Father Tracy. I do outreach ministry in the Latino community. And every year I do well over 100 funerals for Latinos in Rochester. The vast majority are people from families who are poor, who must rely on the Department of Social Service for help in burying their loved ones. It's always a tragedy to lose a loved one, but many of these funerals are for people who died in very tragic circumstances. 2 weeks ago, I did a funeral for a 20-year-old young Latino man who was shot to death. There's a lot of funerals for suicides, for babies, for people who die of liver failure due to drug and alcohol addiction at a relatively young age. And while it's very distressful to bury a loved one under these circumstances, it's even more distressful when they don't have the resources to provide a dignified burial. And it's been very difficult over the last 6 years to get the support of the public to assist these families. And so I support this legislation as far as it goes, and we probably need to do a little bit more, so that families won't have to spend time running around to try to get additional resources from family and friends and neighbors and church, so that they're able to lament the loss of their loved one in supportive circumstances. And I would hope that there's men and women of compassion on both sides of the aisle to support this kind of legislation. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Marvin Mish. I'm part of the Greater Rochester Community of Churches, and I have two simple thoughts. One is that, as you can tell, the faith community is willing to help local government in providing for a dignified burial for the poor. And that's why we started the Supplemental Burial Fund. We are also, as you know, with Sister Grace Miller, advocates for changing the policy that has been reversed 6 years ago, as well as the pastoral presence at the cemetery that Sister Beth LaValle has been leading. This is the way we can collaborate with government to make it better for the whole community. The second point, isn't it about time that we have a public discussion at the county ledge about this? What is the problem here? Why can't it be discussed? So I think that's what this legislation opens the door for, that public discussion at the legislation as well as the public hearing. It's about time.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Again, this is an important piece of legislation in that it sets standards. It sets standards that I feel are required for those people that we service, regardless of whether they have money or not. We need standards. At this point, we're done, but any of us are open for questions if you have any.
Any reason to believe there'll be support on the other side of the aisle?
Well, it got to agenda charter. All right, that's the first step.
We're going to be attending a meeting on Monday, so Monday at 5 o'clock.
You took the pictures down there.
Yes.
Kind of describe what you see.
What you see is a separate and not equal situation for burial at Owatka. Not everything that Owatka Creek Cemetery does is poorly done, but I think that in the case of the South Annex, which is what the Potter's Field is called, there's little effort at this point, because when you're standing in front of a field with very poor markers, have you been there? When you're standing in front of a field with markers of all different sizes and golf shafts, club shafts that are stuck in, not just at row ends, but they may be actually marking a grave, waiting for a marker. That's the golf they could actually use all over the cemetery, so I shouldn't use that as an example. But it's not sodded appropriately. It could be because it's sand. But the one picture is there to illustrate the fact that someone was buried in 2010, and there's still no grass behind their marker. That's what you see. And then when you turn around, you see a very bucolic vision of what everyone thinks a country cemetery should look like. Well kept, trees, grass is cut, everything is trimmed. As I said, separated, not equal.
And perhaps that's a reflection of the way people are treated as well. Not just, there's two ways of burial. One that Sister Grace negotiates with people, and the other way. So the cemetery is kind of a symbol of that.
We didn't give a lot of thought as to what happens to someone that doesn't have a family to bury them, or we assumed didn't have a family to bury them. In the case of Sally Green, when she was buried, that gave you an idea of what happened to someone that had no advocate. And it came to a better end, and it definitely opened up this door that Sister Grace and others have been working on for years. And I didn't, the Democratic side of the aisle didn't have to pick this up at all. It's not like we thought we needed a law to make things fair and equitable and dignified, but I think as time went by and hearing speakers, I've been here since 2008, Sister Grace was there from the very beginning speaking out on this issue, and I became involved and said, we need to change the way we do business in this respect, and we need to give dignity to those that we help in their burial.
I'd say seeing the cemetery gives you a reason. Seeing the cemetery gives you a reason for supporting this proposal. It's a complete no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And my plan is, at the committee meeting, and however this proceeds, to invite the county legislators to come out to one of our services. It's got to be flexible. And then go to the Scottsville Diner to have conversation about the facts of these situations and what are they going to do. So I certainly hope they're not going to reject this proposal before they visit the cemetery the way Cindy gets. Maybe others, I just don't know.
I want to thank the Democrats for picking up this issue. It was a very important issue to us. But we hope that the committee will accept this and really discuss, open it up for discussion. We want the other side of this chamber, we want them to understand what it's like when poor people come to us practically every day, begging us to help them so they can have a dignified burial. And it's very hard when we don't have the resources. We turn to the county. It seems like we're doing the county's work. We're just asking the county, please help us to bury our people with dignity. It's a sad state when poor people have to hit the streets with cardboard posters, tin cans, begging for money so that they can bury their loved one with dignity. They're agonizing and they're crying. I want the other side of this chamber to hear the cries of our people. When a child 12 years old dies and is not buried for 2 months after he dies because the mother can't afford a burial, that's a pretty sad story, pretty bad commentary on the county. And we believe the county has a responsibility to take care of our poor, as I said earlier, in life and not make life so hard for our people. Thank you, sister.
Not all county-assisted burials, though, end up in a Watka. They can go many other places. These are the ones that are completely paid for by the county.
Right? Not being present in some of the meetings, when the meeting is being held for burial, I can say that I've been told that Watka is presented as the least, if not one of the least expensive places to bury, or the least. Allowing a family, that gives the family the feeling like, well, all right, I'll have a little bit more. I can use my resources a little bit differently if I choose the lesser expensive cemetery. But not really knowing that it's 17.5 miles outside of town, not really knowing that it looks the way it looks. And I myself have been there more than once. I've been there a number of times. I have been there when a family came back to celebrate the 21st birthday of a son that had been lost when he was 20. And the headstone had not been placed. There was going to be a stone in this position. They were going to place a stone at this gravesite, but the grave really hadn't been marked properly, that they had to find where he was to celebrate his birthday with him. And they made the trek out there to do that. That's the case of a loving family, didn't have enough funds to bury that loved one, accepted a Watka as an alternative as being lesser expensive, and then when they got there, were blown away. And I've heard more than one story to that effect. Again, I will say, a Watka is not the evil being here, but it is a case where the services they render don't meet my standards, certainly. And I think that there's dialogue to change that, but there may be another cemetery out there that comes forward and doesn't do the same thing. This holds everyone accountable. The markers, they come from all different funeral homes, and they're inconsistent the way you'd expect it to be, because not every funeral home offers the same services. But what we're trying to get is some standardized, consistent services that give honor and dignity to the person that's being marked, their grave. That's it.
when you go and you find a marker that has never had a name written on the paper inside. I stood there and said, I can't believe it. This isn't faded. There's no name. There's no name, no date, no nothing. I don't know if it's a child, a man, a woman, anything. And that was I saw that for the first time on Sunday. And it had been there for a while. I had just walked over it. So you can walk over the markers, you don't know that they're there. The new ones coming out are much, I would say, flimsier. And when they're placed on top of a grave, and the grave doesn't get seeded, and for whatever and I have to say this year's growing season really stunk if you were trying to get seed in for grass to grow, but the types of markers that they're offering now are so open that when the rain hits the dirt goes into the marker. And already there are people that have been passed away and buried in July, and there is just dirt inside everything, hiding what the person's birth was, name was, death. It just obliterates, and it just soaks up the mud. That won't get replaced because it's done once. So if it's going to get done once, and part of the funding comes from the county, it should be done right the first time, and not be allowed to disintegrate within less than a year.
I've had burials at Oaxaca for the funerals I do, and it's indeed very stark and spartan. Most of the burials, however, for the funerals I do take place in Holy Sepulchre Cemetery, the Catholic cemetery. But a typical situation is the funeral director will present the family with options. You can either, for what little money you have and what the county provides, you can cremate your loved one or have them buried at Oaxaca. And neither of those options are acceptable because people know what Oaxaca is like. And so what happens, in the time that they should be mourning their loved one, they're running around to the streets, to churches, to friends, to relatives to try to get additional money to provide a decent burial. And this delays the burial, and sometimes a week and a half after the death takes place. And that's very unacceptable options for our people.
Thanks very much. I think that we've basically come to the end here, and if you have any other questions, you can address them to me or anyone up here later on. Thank you.